goes back millennia that we know that meat was very healing, and that you'd eat plants basically if you had to, and that may not be the best for your health. The wealthy classes of pretty much every country, they would reserve the meat for themselves. And like in England, it was those woods, that was the king's woods, those was the king's deer. You were not allowed to hunt them, you're not allowed to eat animals. You had to just subsist on gruel and maybe a bit of dairy and rabbits if you could catch them. A lot of people in England would catch rabbits, and that's basically how they survived. And it's always been the case that the wealthier individuals that could afford meat, they were generally the healthiest people as well. And they would live longer, they were taller, better stature, better skin, teeth, health, all these other sorts of things. And that goes back to antiquity. There was I was reading up on like cholera epidemic in, like, I think it was like the 1830s, and they even noted there that meat was basically had healing properties, restorative properties, and was beneficial for people at that time, and that eating plants, vegetables, and things like that seemed to cause harm and hurt people, and they were getting more sick as a result of it. And so this is something that has been long understood to be a very important, it's necessary. We need meat, and that plants are not even secondary. They're just a a survival mechanism, just in case you can't get enough meat. Then you have this alternative, which is great. I mean, that would confer a survival advantage, that we can survive on certain plants if we can't get meat, but that in no way means that it's as good as meat. And so that's something we should focus on, or comes without any harm. It's very important to remember that.
Hmm. How have you had success breaking through the mainstream opinions on what people should and shouldn't be eating? Because I think, like, to what Brett was saying before, like having a doctor tell our moms what, eating red meat only, it has a totally different effect than what Brett and I can possibly say. So I'm just curious, like, how have you actually had success doing that? Because it is such an extreme opinion for most people to hear.
Well, just facts. You just stick to the facts. And the fact is that humans have been eating meat for over 2 million years. We've been apex predators for 2 million years. That's what the best evidence shows. And apex predators, by definition, are carnivores. And so the hard rule of biology is that of adaptation. We adapt to our environment, or we die and go extinct. And so we have not gone extinct. So we are clearly well adapted to eating meat and being apex predators. We would not have survived as apex predators if we could not survive as apex predators 2 million years ago. So even 2 million years ago, we were very well adapted to eating meat and to benefit from eating meat. And then that symbiotic relationship just continued on and improved as time went on, as it does. That's how biology works. And so you just stick to the facts. Biology is a hard science. Nutritional studies are not. They're not even science in a lot of cases. Some more propaganda. 11 times, Coca-Cola spends 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research per year than the National Institutes of Health, the NIH. And that's just Coca-Cola. That's not PepsiCo, Nestle, General Mills, Kellogg's, all the other major food brands. So the vast majority of studies published in nutrition are coming from conflicted sources. And that's not even to say the NIH is a pure entity in and of itself. A lot of them have corporate ties and get money and above the table or under the table. And so, and a lot of so-called independent researchers have a lot of conflicts as well. The main vegan nutritional researchers, such as Dr. Gardner at Stanford and Dr. Walter Willett at Harvard, are both self-proclaimed vegans, have been for decades. So they have an ideological bias from the beginning, but they also have extreme conflicts of interest and financial conflicts of interest with the processed food industry and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who are religiously anti-meat. I know Dr. Willett, I don't know if he's involved with the church, but I know that he's done a lot of work with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so, these are conflicts of interest. And so you just sidestep that and you just talk about facts. And you talk about how this is how humans have been designed. Most people understand that because we've all been taught that. And that's what the evidence shows, is that humans have been carnivores. So why would meat be bad for us now if it hasn't been bad for us for the last 2 million years? It doesn't really make sense. And we've just improved and gotten better and taller and smarter and stronger over the past 2 million years. And then something happened around 10, 15,000 years ago, and our brain just went and dropped by 11%. That coincided exactly with agriculture. And so you look at the skeletal remains and you just say, okay, well, before agriculture, people were 5 inches taller. Males had 11% larger brains. Females had 17% larger brains. And they had perfect straight teeth, big wide jaws, and perfectly developed in signs of poor wound healing or infectious disease such as tuberculosis. And immediately after agriculture, that's exactly what you find. It didn't take hundreds of years. It didn't take thousands of years. It was immediate. And it happened exactly the same way everywhere on Earth, regardless of the time, regardless of the food crop that they ended up transitioning to. And we saw this in real time in the last 100 years with the Plains Indians in America. When the American government killed off all the bison, they were just high-fat carnivores. They were just eating bison and pemmican the whole year. And there's a study in 2001 that showed that the Plains Indians in America, just eating bison in the 1800s, were the tallest human beings on Earth. Wow. No one else was taller. People, oh my, even the Dutch. Yes, even the Dutch. They were taller than everybody. And so they were just eating the most meat. Now they are not. They switched over, and you saw that same decrease nearly instantly when they started eating a lot less meat and a lot more plants. And this, again, before processed foods came into play. And now processed food is a major component of everyone's diet in America. They're actually hit a lot harder. They have a much higher prevalence of chronic disease, obesity, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and the rest. So they're being much more strongly impacted. We're seeing this in real time. We're seeing what we saw in the fossil record in real time right now with the Native Americans, with the Native Australians, with the Maasai. They've been getting more and more sick over the past century. Studies in the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s showing that they were extremely healthy. They were 5 inches taller than their compatriots, the Akikuyu, who were eating largely whole food, plant-based diet. And so the exact same disparities that we saw in the fossil record, we're seeing in real life people in between the ones that are eating animal-based and the ones that are eating plant-based. And then as the 20th century goes on, and they're very healthy, especially the male Maasai. They were the healthiest out of everyone looked at, males, females from both tribes. And the males were the healthiest. They ate the most blood, ate the most meat. And the women would have a bit more milk, a lot more milk, and maybe have a bit of plants. And that was new too. That was a new introduction. They just, in the 1920s, they just started eating more millet grains. And that was new. That was a new addition. That was specifically noted in the study that was a new addition, a new recent addition. They were still very healthy. Then you get it to the 1970s, and their health starts declining. They had no signs of heart disease, no mention of heart disease in that study in the 1920s and 30s. And then in the 1970s, all of a sudden they're, oh yeah, look at this. They're starting to get heart disease. And now they have higher rates of diabetes and teeth problems. They have Coca-Cola trucks going in every day, and they sell out of Coca-Cola within, a few minutes, because they have no idea this stuff is so bad for them. Now their diabetes rates are actually a real problem. Now they're damaging their teeth. So they're not living their natural lifestyle. They're not eating their natural diet, and they're getting sicker. So we're seeing this happen in real time. And you can point this out to people, and you can point out the fact that meat was wrongly vilified. It was, there's hard evidence that this was fraudulently vilified by the major food manufacturers, the sugar companies, the Sugar Association, Sugar Research Foundation. And, we have hard evidence of that. That's been published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2016, actual internal memos from the sugar companies talking about how they were perpetrating this fraud on people, to have Harvard professors and others falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease when it was more likely to be sugar. There were strong associative studies showing that there was a clear association between heart disease and sugar and seed oils. And so they're like, okay, well, we need to get opposition research out there, just like the tobacco companies have done for decades. They say, oh, well, our studies show that, it doesn't cause emphysema, it's not addictive, and it doesn't cause cancer, and all these sorts of things. And they knew that it did. And that's why they got, fined for like $400 billion or something like that when those tobacco memos came out. They had memos for 30 years of the tobacco companies showing that, like, they knew exactly what was going on, and they were just trying to protect their interest, which sort of, to me, I think that should be a criminal act at that point. They're knowingly causing harm. They're knowingly keeping a product out there and saying that it's safe when they know it's not. And they're harming people and they're killing people. How is that not a criminal offense? I mean, that should not be just a $400 billion fine. I mean, first of all, they made trillions during that time. So like, what's 400 billion? But they should have been in prison. First of all, they lied under oath, they perjured themselves, and they knowingly caused harm to hundreds of millions of people. And so that should be criminal. Same thing with sugar. They know this stuff is causing harm. They've known it, for probably 70, 80 years. And they've been putting out counter research as a result of that. So you point out all these things. You point out that, the arguments that they have are largely fraudulent or based on fraudulent ideas and studies, and you show the sort of hard evidence, because it doesn't matter what a study said. Like you said, it matters what happens in real life. Okay, well, what happens in real life when the Inuit just eat blubber, fat, and meat? They're healthy as hell. What happens when they stop eating that and they start eating more plants and processed foods? Throughout the 20th century, you just saw them getting a little bit higher rates of heart disease and cancer and chronic disease. But even into the 1990s, they still had lower rates of heart disease than the rest of Canada. And so there was a study, I believe in 1996, that said, okay, well, maybe there's some sort of genetic factor here that they're specially adapted to eating this sort of diet. Well, if you think about it, we're the adaptations. Europeans and other populations that have had agriculture for 10,000 years, we're the adaptations. They are living in the same way that we've been living for 2 million years throughout the ice ages, right? So they're the original. We're the adaptations. And so they looked at it and they found that no, they don't have any genetic defenses against heart disease. They're actually more predisposed to getting heart disease. So we've developed some defenses against developing heart disease, and they haven't done any, right? Because they don't need to, because meat does not cause heart disease. And then in the 2000s and 2010s, you start seeing studies pop up. So, oh, well, everyone says that the Inuit have lower rates of heart disease, but, they don't actually. Look at this. Their heart disease rate's higher. You're like, yeah, idiot. Now, because they're eating a whole bunch of garbage that they're not supposed to eat. But you go back, if they're only eating, and if you distinguish out between the people that are eating modern diets, living in the cities, doing what you do in cities, distinguish that between the population only eating what they're supposed to eat, just meat, it's a very different story. And so you can see that in real time with Maasai. You can see that in real time with the Inuit and the Native Americans. And so, you make this claim and you say, okay, well, this should get worse. But in all the populations that are doing this, we're actually seeing the exact opposite. So these things are just simply wrong. And you point these things out, and most people will have specific, well, what about cholesterol? What about fiber? What about nutrients? And there's answers for all of these things. So you just systematically go through them. But I mean, it's just, these are the facts. Humans are carnivores as a species. It's just the kind of animal we are. And as such, we don't have robust defenses against plant toxins, and they're best to be avoided.